What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to Mets PostGame Show right here on both of our channels. Woof! That was a nail biter throughout the entire game. The Mets' first 1-0 victory of the season, and it gets the Mets to 50 wins on the season, 3 games over 500. And this might have been the best I've seen Diaz this year, in my opinion. And offense, we'll definitely get into the offense a lot because there was nothing except a ground ball up the middle that got us a run, and it was the game winner. But Severino, what did we want to see from Luis Severino? And we'll get into that as well. And of course, recap the game, talk to you guys for as long as we need to. Chris, what's up once again?
Yeah, it was a good win. I always say that it's a great win, but I'm going to shift this into a good win because I think it was very lethargic again from the offensive perspective. Obviously, Luis Severino, we had high hopes going into this game. We talked about Luis Severino in the pregame. If you all were able to join us in the pregame, obviously we talked about him and what we expected, especially following a relatively strong first half out of him. And he absolutely went out there and shoved 6 scoreless innings, 7 strikeouts. The slider looked phenomenal. And yeah, the Mets get the W. We always take those, but the offense is something that I'm continuing to watch out for. Yesterday, obviously, it was Jeff McNeil. That's how they were able to get most of their 4 runs. Today, it's Francisco Alvarez with the ground ball up the middle. And you know what? They get it done. The bullpen held it down. I was screaming for insurance runs the entire game. They didn't get it for the pitching staff and the rotation, but you know what? They get it done. And I'm not going to sit here and complain because a W is a W, no matter how you draw it up. 50th win of the season for our New York Mets. It feels damn good.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we know how many games are left, right? We just played game number 97, right? Not many games to go, right? Not many games to go. And, I was kind of doing the math. My math sucks, but, if the Mets go 500 the rest of the way, they're around 82, 81, 82 wins around that area. What is it, 65 games, 64 games or something like that. The math sucks for me. But you'd be at least 3 games over 2 or 3 games over 500, and that should probably get you in most likely. And that's being modest. And this game was, it wasn't the difference. What I think yesterday compared to today was that there was a lot of good at bats. They were just hitting it right at people today. A lot of hard hit balls right at infielders, right at outfielders, and I think that was the difference from yesterday. Yesterday, there was a lot of bad at bats, a lot of bad pitch selection when it came to noticing certain pitches. There wasn't good at bats. Today, it felt like the at bats were much better, and they were actually hitting the ball hard, even though they only had 6 hits to show for it. They could have had at least over 10 easily. Couple of good catches, couple of unlucky ball placement, basically. And I kind of like the fact that they had better at bats and they hit the ball hard today for a lot of the guys. Like almost everybody in the lineup hit the ball hard today. Some got more lucky than others, but I like the approach today than they had to yesterday. You said it, right? You wanted to see better at bats. I said it in the pregame. They did that. Now the runs need to increase. Obviously, runners in scoring position, you can't go 1 for 12 in a game and expect to win every time. But another close game the Mets play. They play a lot of close games. I think probably more than 75% of their games have been close games with a game that's 1 or 2 runs deficit or ahead late in ball games. So they've been keeping that trend up regardless of how well they've been playing. They've been playing a lot of close games, Chris. And you know what? We got to, I wouldn't call it lucky. It was a well-pitched game on both sides. And look, the bullpen came in after Severino and did their job. And there's not more you can say except you take the win, number 50, and you come tomorrow and win another one and have a chance of winning the series the day after.
Yeah, first of all, you got to tip your cap also to Roddery Munoz. Usually, the trend this season for the Mets lineup has been every single time they see a starting pitcher on the opposition the second time around or even the third time around, typically they do better. Roddery Munoz had everything working today again. Also, like you said, a little combination of luck where the Mets bats this entire series so far in the first two games have just been hitting bullets right at people, and they haven't been able to find any sort of green to compensate for that. But got to tip your cap to the Marlins pitchers today. And yeah, I completely agree with you. I have a live chat poll up on my stream right now on my channel. If you are a part of it, make sure you please vote. With this Luis Severino outing, I'm posing the question to you all as viewers. Would you give, if you were David Stearns, Luis Severino a contract extension right now? Right now. Make sure you go ahead and vote. And we want to know your thoughts and opinions about that because I'm very curious what everyone thinks. But absolutely, the Mets bullpen definitely held it down today. Daniel Nunez, Jose Butto, Edwin Diaz, they got it done. They got into some jams. It felt like they were kind of tiptoeing around trouble, but they get the strikeouts when the strikeouts are necessary, and Edwin Diaz does not look back, and he saves the ball game. I believe, according to Key from Shea and Sons, this is the first time that Edwin Diaz has pitched in Miami since the mishap in the World Baseball Classic. If that's true, that's got to feel good. I'm not sure if that's accurate or not. I think it's accurate. I have not
No,
checked.
before he got hurt, remember he blew the four run lead in Miami. That was the last time he pitched.
Oh, it was the 4-run lead in
Yeah,
Miami. That's right. It was the blown
yeah,
save, not
yeah,
the World Baseball Classic
yeah,
injury. I might have
yeah,
misinterpreted his tweet, so apologies for that.
yeah,
Okay, because I was like thinking they definitely played a series in Miami
yeah,
this year, so he definitely got out there at some point. So apologies. I kind of mistook what that tweet said because it was toward the end of the game. But yeah, no, definitely. Like it's got to feel good because that park in general, whether you're taking into account the injuries or whether you're taking into account the blown save,
yeah.
it's got to feel good to succeed in that ballpark if you're Edwin Diaz. So happy for him. He looked dominant. And like you said, this might have been his best outing of the season so far. And he's had a lot of good ones ever since he came back from that IL stint. So listen, at the end of the day, I see this team and I see the comments in the chat. I see some people also on X saying, listen, this is the Marlins, one of the worst teams in the league. Why are we only winning by one run? Like you can't, this is not how you measure MLB games. Like that's not an accurate way to measure MLB games. You saw it in the last game of the Rockies series, right? Guy hits 3 home runs. They lose 7-3, I believe the final score was. I was in and out of that ball game, whatever. But this is the MLB. We talked about it in the pregame as well. The Marlins lineup is not as bad as everyone thinks. Their pitching hasn't been great, but their lineup is decently solid, enough to win them some ball games. So you can't take any opponents lightly, and I'm definitely not going to fault the Mets for only winning 1-0. Yes, I would have liked to see more runs on the board, and that's going to need to be fixed because obviously we just don't want to see one run on the board no matter who the opponent is. But at the end of the day, I'm not sitting here and discrediting W's against teams that have below 500 records. A team like the Phillies have made a killing on teams against teams with below 500 record, right? With below 500 records. So why would we discredit the Mets at this point when W's matter just as much as the rest of them? So yeah, absolutely. Very proud of this team. Would like to see some more offense going out there tomorrow on Sunday. But you know what? We move a W's to W.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point with Severino, we talked about this in the beginning of June. Like you should put a contract offer to Luis Severino right now. You don't think he would take it, knowing that he still has to risk staying healthy the second half of the season and lose on a big contract? I give him a 2-3 year deal, maybe even a 3 year deal, because he's young. He's young. If he remains healthy, this is the Severino that we've seen in 2018 with the Yankees. Like that's how good he is. And I like that a lot. So in my opinion, we have to really talk about that more and push that point. Now, is it priority number one? Not right now. But, get back to Citi Field, have a conversation, see where he's at with the numbers. right? Because he's going to get paid, regardless if it's the Mets or somebody else. So I think you have to do that with Severino. At least try. He might not want to, but with his injury history, you might get him on a decent contract before he becomes a free agent. So I agree with that.
I will say it's a slippery slope, and I apologize. I must correct myself. Chris Goodwin. I was on the road for the game 3 against the Rockies, so I apologize. 8-5. He's saying the Mets lost, but my point still stands on that. Like I said, sorry for getting the score wrong, but like the point still stands on that. What I want to say about Luis Severino is it's a very slippery slope for him to decide whether signing an extension in this season, during this season, is worth it for what you just said, right? The Mets can try to get ahead of the curve by getting a steal of a deal, but Luis Severino, let's not forget, this is a prove-it-year deal for him coming off of one of the worst, if not the worst, season of his career last year, and he's still in the prime of his career. A lot of people forget that. A lot of people, I don't know if they think that he's 34, 35 years old and he's approaching the end of his career. This guy is what, 30, 31 years old, in the prime of his career, and can get a decent contract as a number 3 or 4 level starter for a lot of good teams out there, right? Not only the New York Mets. So he might be reluctant to sign that 2-year deal, but like you said, Rob, there's a factor at play here where securing a contract when you know you are an injury-prone pitcher might be beneficial to you. So I'm sure those discussions are going on between Luis Severino's agent and the New York Mets, and I'd be very curious. Obviously, like you said, not the main priority right now, but with the way that he's pitched so far this season, with his ERA, the WHIP, the strikeouts, right? He got 7 strikeouts today. The way his arsenal and his stuff just looks compared to last season, you got to be thinking about it at the very minimum.
Yeah, and I see Todd's comment. Let me throw that up here real quick because I think it's important. He's like 30-year-old pitchers who have had injuries can get old fast. Yes, but also he hasn't had a lot of miles on that arm either. Remember, he didn't pitch a lot for the Yankees the last couple of seasons. I know that was because of injury, but he also hasn't been throwing 120, 130, 150 innings over the last couple of seasons either. Now, it's a risk, but you can talk about that with any pitcher. Like, you can't shy away from signing pitchers because you're afraid he might get hurt. If you do that, you'll never get pitchers. Like, why even waste your time? Like, you could say that with every pitcher. There's a pitcher that has injury history. You just have to bite the bullet. And I think Luis Severino is more of a high reward than high risk at this point. This year, it was low risk, high reward. So, and the Mets are benefiting at least through the first half of the season and his first start in the second half. Now, all can mean for nothing, and who knows what happens going forward, but it's not about stuff. It's not about him throwing a ton of innings over his career. It's about if he stays healthy, he has ace type stuff. We've seen it. Wouldn't it be nice to have somebody behind Senga for the next 2 or 3 years? I know Senga with possible, I don't think he can get that opt out now because of the innings, but imagine having 2 or 3 years of Senga and Severino as your 1-2, and now all you have to worry about for the next couple of seasons is your 3, 4, 5 starters. That's a big difference than needing an ace or needing a solid number 2. And you might get a big discount from a Severino than somebody that might be, on the free agent market that people might like, and you have to give $200 million to. Severino is not going to cost that much. He probably won't even cost $100 million over 3 years or 4 years. So that's what we're thinking. We're trying to get a little bit of a team-friendly deal, but also Severino gets paid because, again, he got $13 million coming off his worst season of his career. The way he's pitching now, if he continues that, he can probably be $20 million or more. Like, that's what pitchers are going for who are actually good. So we'll see. That is not
I would
obviously.
think to just back that comparison, I would think maybe a Sonny Gray-esque type deal for Luis Severino. Maybe a tad under that with the AAV. I believe he signed for 3 years, $75 million, if I'm not mistaken. So 25 a year. Yeah. I would say maybe a touch under that, but that's exactly like if I had to guess a projection for Luis Severino, that's what it would be. The third year kind of scares me a little bit. I would rather have 2, like you said, but if it must go to that 3 years, at this point, scared money don't make money. So
Yeah,
that's
and
that's that's what I'm on.
you know what? And to incentivize it a little bit for that third year, give him some bonuses if he reaches a certain amount of innings. If he, I don't know, isn't in the top 5 of Cy Young, you give him a bonus or some stuff like that. Or even, if he pitches a certain amount of innings over 3 years, the fourth year option kicks in. Some type of incentive to make him sign a deal, because I think we're playing with fire here when it comes to, well, Severino. We keep on looking to the past and not, like, I know it's recency bias, but who are you going to get on the free agent market that hasn't been injured in their career and that has been as good or better than Severino? And it's still a risk. Wouldn't you rather save $100 million signing Severino than a guy like Walker Buehler, who's probably going to get $200 million on the open market, who's been injured and who has pitched less this year than Severino? So, you got to take your options and pick them wisely, because you don't want to spend $200 million on a guy that, yeah, he's great when he has the right stuff and he's healthy, but it's a dangerous game to play, because you can use that extra $100 million you're not going to give Buehler and give it to $80 to $90 million to Severino. That $100 million can go a long way in free agency and what you need to do for next season. Again, we're going way ahead of ourselves, but it's good. It's a good point, because Severino has pitched so well, which, besides me and you, Chris, not a lot of people thought Severino was a good signing, right? We said it from day one when we signed him, when we went on that live when they signed Severino. We thought that was a good signing. You bought low, even though $13 million is not low, but it was a low risk, high reward. And it's working out right now for the Mets 97 games into the season. So another good performance coming out. And look, we worried about Severino coming out of the All-Star break, not pitching in 12 days. And look, 2 hits, no runs, 3 walks, 7 strikeouts, 6 innings. And what I really, really liked, and people have been complaining about Mendoza taking out pitchers at moments like we thought he was going to take him out with in the 6th inning with 2 outs. What was happening? Oh no, he's going to take him out with 2 outs and bring in Nunez, Buto. And we wouldn't have, some people would have went crazy if Buto didn't get the job done, but he spoke to Severino, the guy he knows more than anybody else on his team. And he spoke to him, and you saw right away Severino was like, I want to pitch, I want to pitch, I want to pitch. And Mendoza, with his gut, because I'm telling you right now, the book would have said to take his ass out, because you're protecting the innings and you're protecting the pitch count. With Severino, a little bit. When Sanger comes back and you go to the 6th man, as they talked about on the broadcast, everybody's innings are going to get lightened up a little bit, based or stretched out a little bit based on the 6-man rotation. But also, you might hurt your bullpen in the long run as well, which leads to the deadline and adding some better arms that can go multiple games in a row, and you don't have to worry about them, who are actually relievers. And we'll see how that goes. But that's the way I see it, Chris, with Luis Severino. I love the fact that he wanted to stay in that game, which I'm not shocked. A player usually does. But Mendoza making that decision, that wasn't a book decision. That wasn't analytical there. That was talking to his player and having a feel for the game. How many times have we bitched and moaned about managers don't having a feel for the game and are so analytical heavy and book heavy? Sometimes you got to use your gut and read the player. And he did that. Once again, he's done this many times this year. Look, managers are going to make questionable calls. Good managers, bad managers, great managers. But I like when Mendoza talks to his player and see where he's at. And see, hey, is your arm tired? Are you tired? We can get a fresh arm in here. Talk to your guys. And that communication is key to why I think Mendoza has really helped turn this around, along with the players playing well. But Mendoza keeping that calm mentality, that calm demeanor, having confidence in his players when nobody else does. I think that's a big thing, a big talking point to talk about, because of the fact that it's not talked about enough about Mendoza. He's had a really good season. And I think Mendoza has a lot to do with this team being where they're at right now because the feel that he has for his players and the confidence the players have in him.
Yeah, this is a type of move that could have got Mendoza some serious heat amongst this fan base, right? Like he was going out there, and this isn't the first time that we've seen Mendoza do this, where he goes out there seemingly wanting to make a pitching change, and Luis Severino's like, no, 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 like I want to stay in this game, and they have that established rapport, right? Being together on the Yankees, so I really do feel like they have a good feel for each other, and like, listen, at the end of the day. Carlos Mendoza seems like, as a rookie manager, he is light years ahead of other rookie managers in terms of understanding the feel of the game and understanding the feel of the players and what they need in that certain circumstance or situation. He took a very big risk from an optics standpoint, right? Because these guys, at the end of the day, they do scroll X. They do scroll the news headlines the day after. If this went south for the New York Mets, and let's say Luis Severino doesn't get out of that inning unscathed, a lot of people are going to point to Carlos Mendoza, right? And having enough trust in your player to go ahead and do that in that heat of the moment during the game, in a close game, mind you, because the Mets couldn't get you any insurance runs, the Mets offense, that is a very big testament to the trust that he has in Luis Severino. So, yeah, I absolutely love that. And I would probably still be talking about it in the same way if things did go south, because you can't get too caught up in the actual result of things. If you make the conscious decision with the best sort of mind frame or frame of mind and having the Mets' best interest at heart, which we would hope that everybody right in this organization does, and Carlos Mendoza does, then if you make that split decision to leave Luis Severino in the game, I'm gonna back that 100%, no matter if that turns to a disaster or not. Now, a lot of people definitely have their differences in opinions. I would say this take is drastically different because of the type of pitcher that Sean Manaea is, where I was left wondering and scratching my head why they went back out there in the fifth inning with Sean Manaea. He doesn't have that same pedigree, no disrespect to Sean Manaea. He doesn't have that same sort of fire to him, that same sort of, I don't know, edge to him on the mound that I see Luis Severino have. And it was two different circumstances because Luis Severino was already dealing at that point and Sean Manaea wasn't. So this is two different circumstances, and that's why I'm singing two different tones right now between the two situations. But yeah, absolutely 100% love it. Carlos Mendoza knew if that didn't go the way that he had planned and the way that Luis Severino had sold him right on it going, then the headlines would have been absolutely obliterating Carlos Mendoza. And that's just what, it is, right? This is the game that you play when you are a manager in the New York market, right? The decisions that you make, whether they are in good faith, like they're always going to be in good faith, but whether they work out or not, you're going to get the reward when it goes your way. But not many people are going to have this sort of level-mindedness to be like, okay, I see where he was coming from. Even if it didn't work out, at the end of the day, the Mets lose. But I like that situation. I like the scenario in terms of leaving Luis Severino in the game. Me, on the other hand, like I said, regardless if this was win or loss, I like the decision to leave Luis Severino in. And that's just kind of how I'm going to approach that sort of take. But yeah, absolutely 100%. Luis Severino deserves all the credit in the world. And so does this damn Mets bullpen, man. They fired me up, Rob. I'm not going to lie to you. Jose Butto, Daniel Nunez, and Edwin Diaz to close out a ball game is one of the most absolutely electric, I guess, 7th, 8th, and 9th inning duos that I've seen as a combination for the New York Mets so far in 2024. I don't know about you, but I like that combination to end the game. And I really hope that we're able to see more of that down the stretch in 2024.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, if you're going to keep Butto, Nunez, and Diaz as like your 7, 8, 9, I'd like to use Nunez and Butto one inning so you can have him for maybe 3 games in a row if need be, instead of using him for 2 innings or, in situations like that. I think that's a little dangerous to play with when it comes to guys like that when they pitch, 2 innings in a row, there's a chance that they might not pitch the next game. And I think that's important to realize that I think we have to get a little uh, more responsible with their innings when it comes to having them spread out a little bit more. I'd rather have them for a three games in a row in a series than having it 1 game or maybe 2 in a 3 game series, maybe even a 4 game series like this one is with the Marlins. So I think there's a that's why you also got to get, obviously, at the deadline 1 or 2 more arms, in particular 2 arms, just because you don't want to always use Nunez and Buto all the time because there's not many other guys trusted. Maybe Shory Foley, who's going to be coming back soon, might actually help this bullpen a little bit. He was pitching one before he got hurt, so he'll be an added arm in this bullpen when he comes back healthy. But I don't know if you heard me, Chris, but when it comes to Nunez and Buto, I liked him to stick to like that 1 inning per game, so you can stretch their usage out over 3, maybe 4 games if you're really pushing it, because we don't want to see Ottavino. We don't want to see Diekman. That's why it's important. We've been talking about trade deadline. We need a lefty. Like, if we can get a solid lefty, and I keep on going back to Tanner Scott, who, we've seen already in this series, that's a guy to go after. Because of the fact that I think we need a solid lefty that is good. We can't go into a the stretch run of the season with a lefty that we don't trust. Danny Young is still kind of hit or miss. Diekman is a dumpster fire. Maybe he can go back to form like earlier in the season, but I can't trust that, and you can't trust this. And because like when Nunez and Buto are not in the game and they're not available, you know what's coming. It's Diekman and Ottavino, and that's a problem because that's not a confident bridge to Diaz, and that's the problem. Once you get past the A relievers, it doesn't go to B relievers. It goes to like D relievers, and that you can't have. That's a problem. Maton is a guy that we're hoping can fill those roles where Buto or Nunez might not be available that day. Maybe. But they also said when we first got Maton that he's going to be used a lot. They're going to use him a lot. And you need him. Because if you can get that third guy, if Maton could be that third guy with Buto, with Nunez to bridge to Diaz, Ottavino and Diekman is kind of irrelevant. Ottavino, mop-up duty at all times. And Diekman, maybe you'll throw him in against a tough lefty just because you just have to throw him a lefty every now and then. And that's what we're hoping for right now. If you can get 4 guys, maybe Maton is that addition, and now you only have to worry about that one lefty in the bullpen that you can get at the trade deadline, Chris. At least that's what I'm trying to think when it comes to Nunez and Buto.
No, that's what I'm saying. So whenever we were in the first half and we saw Daniel Nunez going 2 innings, right, maybe even plus, because the Mets bullpen was just that much in shambles, my dream scenario, right, with the stuff that Daniel Nunez has, and this is, I think we see him back-to-back days, right, because he pitched last night as well. This is the sort of role that I envision him taking in the second half, especially post-trade deadline, which also is the reason why I said yesterday during our stream that the Mets are 100% going to be buyers. I don't know to what capacity in the bullpen. I don't know what like tier level guys they're going to get, but they have to be buyers because they have to make Diekman and Adam Ottavino expendable while still replacing their production in order for Daniel Nunez to assume a 1 inning type of role. Quite frankly, I know Daniel Nunez can pitch more than 1 inning. That is not optimal for the Mets for him. And I think that's what you're trying to hit on is that it's not optimal for the Mets bullpen to pitch him more than 1 inning, because by virtue of the trade, you would eliminate him at that point from pitching on back-to-back days, which
Yes.
he was able to do in this series so far.
Yeah.
So I agree 100%. You got to make the guys expendable in the front end, being Jake Diekman and Adam Ottavino, which is presumably what I would assume the Mets are going to try to go out there in this market at the deadline and do, whether it's your big names or whether it's value guys that David Stearns trusts just even a tad bit more than an Adam Ottavino and Jake Diekman. And I think we've already started to see that with Phil Maton. Now, yes, Phil Maton is still absolutely a question mark. We don't know what capacity we can actually trust him in. We've only seen him in a handful of games so far in situations. But I'm going to tell you right now, if you are David Stearns and you are approaching this second half and you see what you have with a 1-2 combination of Edwin Diaz and Daniel Nunez, and you see what you have potentially in the electricity with the 95-mile-per-hour fastball and a changeup that will fool a lot of hitters, and Jose Butto making that transition from the rotation to the bullpen, you would be very hard-pressed to ignore your needs in the bullpen to try to not promote that 1, 2, 3 in the 7th, 8th, and 9th combo being your permanent combo in trying to make a playoff run. Like I said, I know if I've had discussions surrounding Jose Butto going to the rotation, if the Mets are going to deal one of their rotation arms right now, but if the Mets do find it within themselves to utilize Jose Butto and make the conscious decision to keep Jose Butto in the bullpen, that 7th inning with Reed Garrett injured, right? We don't know what his status is coming back. Hopefully we do get him back. With Sean Reed Foley's status unknown in terms of the injury moving forward, because he's had multiple so far this season. With Drew Smith being lost for the year, with Brooks Raley being lost for the year, with Nate Lavender no longer being an option to get called up, with him being lost for the year, we've gotten to a point where the Mets are going to have to make and pivot to a guy like Jose Butto potentially. And you know what? I'm fine with that. If they trust him enough to do that, I think he has shown me enough as a fan in order to believe in him for that 7th inning and keeping a close ball game close, or keeping the lead for the Mets in that 7th inning potentially. And they just got to find out who's going to be potentially pitching that 5th and mainly 6th inning. If you're a New York Mets relief pitcher. So I 100% agree with you. They need to get to a point where they bring in enough guys in order to make Daniel Nunez and Jose Butto 1-inning guys. Because I know Jose Butto is also able to go multiple innings, but if you can also reserve him primarily for 1 inning, being that 7th inning, I'm going to take that all day long, and your bullpen's going to be in good shape because those guys are going to be fresh enough to potentially go back-to-back days.
Yeah, exactly. And like, that's the idea. Regardless of what you do at the deadline, you need to have those main guys. If these guys, now, depending on who we get, right? We might get an 8th inning guy. We might get, a guy that can be a flex guy, 7th inning, 8th inning, maybe a guy who was a closer on another team that we might throw in the 8th inning, right? But at the moment, if Jose Butto and Nunez and Diaz are going to be 7, 8, and 9, again, depending on, I'm assuming Nunez is definitely your 8th inning, your bridge guy to Diaz. In my opinion, that's who it is. You have to utilize them better. And look, I'm not blaming Mendoza here because he has no choice to pitch these guys multiple innings sometimes and pitch them back-to-back days, because that's the only guys he trusts. And you got to win ball games here. You can't mess around with games, that are close like this, where he could have easily said, you know what, I used Nunez yesterday. I'm not going to use him. I want to save him for, tomorrow's game at the very least. But what are you supposed to do? Have a chance of losing this game by bringing in Diekman, Ottavino? No, you can't do that, right? We might suffer tomorrow, but it comes back to Christian Scott tomorrow, where the problem is you might have Jose Butto. I would think you would have Jose Butto available. You'll have Hauser available. I know people don't like Hauser right now, but he's going to be available. And he's probably going to be piggybacking off of Christian Scott like we've seen already with Christian Scott. So Hauser's coming into the ballgame probably in the 5th or 6th inning, depending on the pitch count of Christian Scott. So expect that tomorrow, right? You'll have Diaz available. That's good. Buto will probably be available. Worst case scenario if Hauser doesn't have it. So you got a couple of guys that I wouldn't say 100% trusted in Hauser, most likely, but you do have a decent amount of decent options going into tomorrow's game. Now, Monday, I know we're not there yet. That's going to be very interesting. Maybe Nunez being off today, maybe you'll have him available on Monday, but Monday might be the Ottavino Diekman game. Like, it's a strong possibility. So you just hope that the Mets put up 150 runs tomorrow, and you don't have to worry about using Diaz or using Hauser or anybody, or it might be Hauser, but save Budo for maybe the next two games, and that's what we're hoping for. So at this moment, you just got to win ball games, and you know what? Worrying about who's available right now is probably least on Mendoza's mind right now. Like, he's got to win every game, or at least try to win every game. And you can't protect every arm for tomorrow or the day after, because if you do that, you're trying to foreshadow, the games when you got a game in front of you that you're trying to win. And if you lose that game because you didn't use somebody, or you use a B or C level reliever who's not very good, and you lose, people are going to question that decision, Chris. So I think that's the balancing act that Carlos Mendoza is dealing with right now, with probably three trusted guys, maybe three. And Buto, Nunez, and Diaz is the only three he probably trusts right now.
Yeah, 100%. Listen, this Mets bullpen has undergone a lot of change so far this season. Change that you can't really account for if you are a GM or Pobo of a team like the New York Mets. And I agree with Ray here in the chat. Absolutely. The injury of Brooks Raley really was the start of everything changing for this Mets bullpen. Now, at that time, you found a gem in Reed Garrett, and we know where Reed Garrett is right now. He's on the IL, which doesn't really do you any good, and I hope for his speedy recovery, but it's just going to be plug and play, and us Mets fans, especially up until the deadline, have to accept that it's just going to be plug and play. Maybe they bring up, right, if they're sick of Diekman, they bring up one of these lefties that they've acquired within the last couple of weeks. I believe Matt Gage is one and Alex Young most recently is the other. But again, they're hit or miss, don't have much sample size to them, and they fit the mold in the description of a plug and play type, I guess, approach is what I want to say. So I don't know. At the end of the day, you know who you have in the back end. Jose Buto, solid, I will say, because I trust in Jose Buto. I know a lot of people have pushed back on the trust of Jose Buto, but I've always trusted Jose Buto because he's proved to me this season that he's a bulldog out there and he's got that energy to go along and back that up. I trust Daniel Nunez, right? He's been an absolute stud. And I obviously trust Edwin Diaz. It's about who you throw into the game before those three guys can get up. Adrian Hauser started off fantastic and definitely is supposed to be that long man in the bullpen. After transitioning out of the rotation, I would like for him to be that solidified long man and sort of phase Jose Buto out of that role with the way this Mets bullpen is shaking out with the current personnel. But I will say, after the deadline, we're going to have to reapproach this conversation and re-engage with what the Mets have. And hopefully by that time, they've added enough personnel for us to be like, okay, now we have our solidified 7th, 8th, and 9th, barring any unforeseen injuries that might take place between now and then. And you know what? We'll go from there. But for right now, Mets fans, I know it's kind of frustrating, right? And this is the way that the Mets bullpen, and for as long as I can remember, has shaken out every single year. But it really is just going to be plug and play. And we're going to have to bite our nails right late in the game if it's a close game more often than not. And that's just how it's going to have to be. I don't think there's any workaround to that, especially right now on July 20th.
Mute. Sorry about that. I'm on mute. Yeah, it's a lot of plug and play because of the fact that there's not much to work with. And people been killing Mendoza a lot on certain moves, like why bring in Ottavino, why bring in Diekman? Well, because when you use the same guys that you trust in almost every day, they can't pitch every day. You're gonna blow out their arms, and that is the issue that he's fallen into right now. And he's been dealing with this. Oh, by the way, during this 7-8 week, stretch of winning baseball, so he's been managing it to the best of his abilities. Some days it's going to be Ottavino and Diekman, piggybacking the starting pitcher, and you pray to whatever God you want to pray for, to hope that they pitch at least decent, and if they have a lead, hold on to it. So look, it's plug and play. It is what it is until we get reinforcements. If that's Sean Reed Foley and another arm at the deadline, then so be it. So we just have to deal with it. But that's where the offense comes in, Chris. And this, lack of runs that we see. I mean, they scored 4 yesterday, which is not terrible. I know it was only one guy mostly, but they scored 4 runs yesterday. They got 1 run today. The at-bats were better today than yesterday, as I mentioned earlier. But the offense still has to carry this team. As much as the starting pitching has been solid, the offense is going to continue to take this team where it needs to be until the reinforcements come in the bullpen. And now we can really be cooking with some good oil when it comes to an overall good team. Because, it was the starting pitching in the beginning of the year that was holding it down, doing pretty well. And the bullpen with the Rallies and the Smiths, and, even though Diaz was struggling, the bullpen was still pretty good in April and very early May. And then it seemed to turn around where everybody was bad in May. That's why we had the record we had in May. And in June, it was the offense and the starting pitching where the offense finally came around. So you see what happens when the offense carries a team. It's a lot easier to win, regardless of your starting pitching, regardless of your bullpen. You win a lot more games than you lose when the offense does their job. Now that the starting pitching has been, well, I would say about, if on a scale of 1 to 10, they're probably a good 7 overall. That's how good they've been. And that's with Noel Senga. That is with McGill in and out of the rotation. It's with Buto being in the rotation for a little bit. Scott being in and out of the rotation. So it's been somewhat of a revolving door in our top 5. And that's something that is very interesting to continue to look at, because we all killed Hefner. Right? Look at him. Like, does he get credit now, knowing that the starting pitching, Manaea's gotten better, Severino has been good all year, right? David Peterson, where's the credit to the pitching coach with Peterson, right? We killed him for McGill. Quintana was terrible early on, and they killed him as well. Maybe he deserves a little bit of credit, Chris. I'm just saying. Like, the pitching has been a lot better than people expected. The innings going deeper early on was a problem, but how do you coach that? It's kind of hard to coach that. But, I mean, he's starting to – I think he should get a little bit of credit. We talk about giving – a lot of our streams, we like to give credit to certain people, right? You brought up in a pregame Jeff McNeil, right? We like to give credit where credit's due. Do you think it's time to start giving credit to the man that a lot of people wanted fired over the last couple of seasons?
I don't know. It's hard for me to say it. It's the same thing that goes for the hitting coaches, right? Like with the recent Mets lineup success in the first half, it's like, how much do we attribute that to these players going out there and making those individual adjustments versus what these coaches are saying to them? I don't know what happens behind closed doors. I don't know what Hefner's saying to these players behind closed doors. I know a lot of people are still pissed off in this Mets fan base that Hefner takes 5 years to go out there and talk to a pitcher when he's struggling out there, right? And we don't see him as often as we should. But I don't know. Like I said, Jeremy Hefner has survived so many different regimes for a reason. Other teams somehow wanted to trade for Hefner for a reason. I don't know what goes on behind closed doors. I would hope that a veteran pitcher like Jose Quintana, who's been around this league and has had a lot of successful years in this league, is able to make midseason adjustments to get himself out of a funk. But I simply don't know, Rob. I really can't answer that. And I don't want to answer that because I don't know at the major league level how much success should be attributed to a hitting coach or a pitching coach versus the actual players themselves. These players watch film. These players have been around the game for a long time. And at the end of the day, I bet you these pitchers know their own mechanics better than some of these coaches out there. So I don't really want to speak out of turn. I know we had rough conversations surrounding Jeremy Hefner. Maybe they were a little bit unfair. And like MEZ saying in the chat, maybe Hefner's overrated. I don't think any of us will know what the answer is. I guess the final answer will be if he sticks around for another season next year versus not. And until then, I don't know who we attribute success to. But what I will say is that I'd like to think these players are making adjustments. You heard it on the offensive side of Jeff McNeil. We've been talking about Jeremy Barnes. We've been talking about Eric Chavez. And we've been talking about the sort of approach and the styles of offense under these two hitting coaches. An unusual situation with co-hitting coaches, Eric Chavez coming back into the fold this season. They were talking about it specifically with Jeff McNeil's approach today. How in the first half, he was trying to guide baseballs and he was trying to beat the quote unquote still existing shift right to the pull side that they were sort of deploying on him. But now, as of recent, because Jeff McNeil, regardless of what he did today, has been taking better at bats as of recent. And we saw, especially last game, he's been hitting baseballs and he even hit a rocket today that just so happened to go into the glove of Josh Bell, I believe, at the first base line, on the first base line. So, what did they say? I believe it was Gary initiating this conversation in the booth. They've been saying he's not trying to guide the baseball over the shift anymore. He's not trying to guide the baseball over the shortstop anymore like he has done so in recent years. And he's had success doing so, but it didn't work out for him. He's trying to hit the baseball hard first and foremost, and wherever it goes, it goes. And we saw that last night when he absolutely obliterated a baseball to the pull side, which is not anything like we've seen from Jeff McNeil in a very long time. So, like I said, I don't know who's making these adjustments. I believe Gary Cohen even said that Jeremy Barnes said he didn't know why one approach works for Jeff McNeil versus the other. I really do think it's just these players at the end of the day making adjustments for themselves, and the hitting coaches will either take credit for it or they'll sort of get bagged on for it, and that's just how it's going to go. I don't know. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I thought it was a good question to ask you in the chat because of the fact that we can't wait to kill and want to fire pitching coaches, hitting coaches when things aren't going well. When things are going good, like some people saying, oh, now the pitching coach is overrated. Now he was overrated. Why wasn't he overrated when the pitchers were doing bad? We didn't want to blame the pitchers. We wanted to blame Hefner or Chavez when the offense wasn't doing well. See, you can't have it both ways. It's either the pitching coach helping with adjustments or it's just the players doing what they have to do and the coaches are just overrated. We could say that, but there's many instances where Severino, and Gary Cohen brought it up on the broadcast about when Severino was going to different teams and he asked the question to teams, how can you make me better? A lot of people talked about throwing inside more with your fastball, two-seamer to be exact. And, a lot of teams said that. And the Mets were one of the teams that not only said that, but if you go back to once they signed him and what David Stearns talked about on his Severino conference when they signed him, he talked about the tipping of the pitches that the Mets noticed when they met with Severino to go over his free agency and see if they could sign him. They talked about his tipping of the pitches, talking about throwing his fastball inside that he's never done in his career, even when he was having good seasons, and the pitching lab that the Mets have that put in over this year and a half. That is huge, and who knows what it really is. The fact of the matter is, if the player's doing well, who cares? Who cares who's doing the adjustment? Who's telling him? Or if he's doing it in his own notes? Who cares? It's getting done. And that's the whole point, right? Professionals, I don't care if you're a professional or not, everybody needs help at some point, regardless of the career you're in, the position, the job you're in. Every now and then, you're going to need help. You might think you know all the answers or have all the solutions, but we all don't. We all know that, right? A lot of times, egos get in the way. You think you could do everything. But sometimes you might need that little pat on the back. Hey, you know what? You're raising your arms a little bit too high. You know, when you're throwing your pitch, you're a little bit more sidearm 3/4 than you usually are when you're pitching well, right? That little adjustment that the pitcher sometimes might not see or feel, a pitcher or a hitting coach might see that little difference of adjustment that can change everything. The player still has to perform and act on that change and do it repeatedly and consistently. But that's why the coaches are there. Are they, for the most part, overrated? Probably. But it's little things like that is why coaches and even some players on the same team might see that adjustment and might think that adjustment's going to work. So I think it's a combination of everything. Not really going into the depths of the Mets coaching, but I think it's important because I was just thinking about it and I was like, let me ask. Why not? Right? It's a talk show, right? That's what we're doing here. So, Chris, when it comes to this game, right? And to finish up this stream, 1-0. It wasn't pretty. Good pitching from everybody on the Mets today. Are you concerned about this offense? I know the at-bats were better. They hit a lot of hard balls, but they didn't find grass. They didn't find green, as you say. Are you concerned over these last 2 games that this offense might take a step back from what they have been over the last 6-7 weeks, where they've been killing the ball and scoring 6.5 runs per ball game?
First of all, let me go back on the point of Luis Severino just real quick. Exactly like you said, the barometer that I judge of a confident pitcher is if they are able and willing to throw that heater inside and often to saw off opposing batters' bats, or if they're just willing to brush opposing batters off the plate with the inside fastball. I think it's a lost art, and I really do like Luis Severino incorporating that more, whether that's coming from Francisco Alvarez himself or Hefner, doesn't matter. I wish everybody in the Mets staff would take note of that. So the heaters inside and also just changing the eye levels, because there are a couple of instances of Luis Severino raising the eye level, throwing that heater upstairs and getting some swing and misses on some strikeouts. I love that. I love that, love that, love that. But they were still competitive enough, right, on those high fastballs to be around the strike zone to entice the hitters to swing at it. That is the point, keeping it competitive no matter what the count is. Second of all, no, I'm not concerned about the Mets lineup. I know I went on a huge rant on my post game yesterday, talking about some bad at-bats in key situations with missed opportunities. Yes, the runs didn't, I guess, quite equate today with the Mets only putting up 1 run. I'm not concerned because I still like, I guess, how hard the Mets are hitting the ball and how well they are squaring up the baseball. And I think it's a matter of time until that kind of luck just presents itself, and they start finding green out there in the outfield. So I agree with you. The process today was at least better than yesterday. And you've seen it, right? Jose Iglesias even yesterday, Mark Vientos yesterday, Brandon Nimmo today. A lot of guys in this series have not found the success in the results, but they've been hitting baseballs hard on the nose. So I would hope that that bad luck doesn't continue. But that being said, as I pointed out in the stream yesterday, as my word of caution, it's always in the back of my mind that at any given moment, especially when you take in a break in the momentum of the season like we did in the All-Star break, that the old version of the Mets lineup, pretty players only meeting, might come back. It's in the back of my mind, so it doesn't scare me, it's just kind of a thought that's always lingering there. So until they go out there and put up 6-7 runs and have that sort of breakout game in the second half, it's always going to be in the back of my mind. But I will say, with what I've seen in the first 2 games, even though the results haven't been there, I've been liking the swings that they've been taking. So I don't think this is going to be an extended sort of quote unquote slump that we'll see here to begin the second half. Like I said, and like Nick said, and he did a great job sort of kind of like calming me down yesterday when I was going on my rant, which is why I appreciated his perspective. At the end of the day, I've said the same thing myself, especially in the first half. We know slumps will happen, and we know individual slumps will happen.
Yes.
But what the Mets offense did and the lineup did in the first half, especially when you talk about Pete Alonso, right? The guys behind him, they picked him up. The guys around McNeil in the bottom of the order, they picked him up. And when they got going and the Mets started winning ball games more often than not, guys, they weren't in an extended team slump. They were still in individual slumps here and there, right? With Pete Alonso, Jeff McNeil, whoever. But the rest of the guys surrounding them picked them up. And I think that it's okay to go into individual slumps. If Mark Vientos goes for an 0 for 30 stretch or a 1 for 30 stretch here starting tomorrow, guess what? That's okay as long as Francisco Alvarez starts to come around, as long as Pete Alonso right before Mark Vientos starts to come around, right? And that's what I think the Mets need to sort of mitigate happening. Avoid the team slump. Because at that point, it's very hard to win ball games.
Yeah.
We all will expect individual slumps. Nobody's perfect. So that's how I'll kind of end that question in what you just asked me. No, I'm not concerned. That is my first and foremost answer. But I will say, as talking about this team all season long, on screen here with you, individually, with Nick, whoever, it's in the back of my mind. Automatically, like no matter what, they can be playing their best baseball, and the next game comes around, I'm like, I hope we don't lay an egg today. But that's just me as a Mets fan. I think that's Mets fans in general. We just worry about what's ahead without focusing sometimes solely on what's right in front of us. And at the end of the day, I like the at-bats generally that the Mets took today. And that's a big step up from what we saw yesterday. And we just hope that it gets them in the right direction. And the results of it start producing themselves in terms of actual runs being scored. So we'll take the victory all day long, guys. The Mets win, and our Saturdays are all better because of it. I love it.
Absolutely. I can enjoy my days off, or at least going into my day off, not being pissed off and cursing at people on X and getting upset in the group chat that we have very often. Get upset back and forth with each other. But it's all love. It's the love of the team. So that's where we are. So with that said, guys, the Mets win 1-0. It was a gritty performance. These 1-0 wins sometimes show a lot about the team. That, all right, the offense wasn't there. Guess who stepped up? The pitching today, right? Tomorrow, it can be the opposite way around, where the offense picks up the pitching, who might not pitch well. That is what Chris is talking about. Not only is the lineup helping each other out when somebody's not doing well, they pick each other up in that same lineup. The rotation, if the starting pitcher's not pitching great, the bullpen seems to keep it within range so the offense can come back. Everybody's chipping in. Everybody's doing what they need to do to make things happen, to win ball games. And that's why this team came back from the dead, from 11 games under to 3 games over. And by the end of tonight, could be in a second wild card or at least one of the wild card spots going into tomorrow. So if they continue that, look, there's going to be cold spells. You just hope they don't happen at the same time, like Chris said. So let's just see. We got Christian Scott on the mound tomorrow. Before anybody goes crazy, remember, he's on a pitch count. He's not going deep into the ball game. You're going to see Hauser, possibly Buto, and Diaz should be available. So that's probably your options going into tomorrow. So make sure you understand that going into that game tomorrow, because I don't want to get comments on the stream during the game and people like, how dare they take Christian Scott? Look how great he's been. Yes, but they don't care about the situation. They care about his arm and his future, right? As much as we want to win every ball game, and they want to win too, They got to keep this kid healthy. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to win while protecting an arm that is going to be part of our future. That's how teams think, not just the Mets. Not just the Mets. The Yankees are doing it with Heel. Many other teams are doing it around baseball. You just have to deal with it. But go into the game understanding that. So, Chris, it's always a pleasure. Pre-game, post-game today. Always a lot of fun. Everybody in the chat. Over 100 in my stream right now. I'm not sure how many Chris have, but he's on X as well, so he's killing it right now as well. Remember, guys, the Mets can lose ball games, but they can bounce back. We talked about that many times. Bounce back. So once again, guys, appreciate you guys tuning into the Mets post-game show. Mets win 1-0. We'll see you tomorrow for another game, game 98 of the season. Let's see if we can get 4 games over 500. Chris, have a great day. Everybody in the chat, have a great night. Let's go, Mets. See you tomorrow on a Sunday. Have a great night, guys. Let's go, Mets.
Let's go, Mets.
Meet the Mets, meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life because the Mets are rich.